I think one of the ways we've combated that is we've started many different businesses. So if maybe one we can't focus on fully, we move on to the next one, or we focus on this, or, like I was saying before, when we buy a large collection, we just focus on that. And, we're lucky. My wife works with me. It's really just the two of us in a small team. We're able to pivot, and you have to be smart in business. When COVID happened, a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, we had like 4 live shows coming out. So we had to figure out at that moment in time, what are we going to do? We were able to pivot and figure it out really fast, but we had a very short period of time. What's that?
What did you do? Just focus on e-commerce?
We moved it digitally. We moved everything online. We made it work.
Okay. And what was the biggest challenge of having to move everything online so quickly?
Trying to make sure that it translated digitally. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We were, for the most part at that time, throwing live events. So how do you take a live event and put it online? And I'm not necessarily saying throwing, virtual markets. We did those and they were fine. But it was more like, how do you take something that you have access to and profit off of it? And we had been lucky because we had so many shows set up. We had a lot of stock. I had a huge amount of collection sort of left over, not knowing what I was going to do with it. And we just said, all right, let's become an auction business, basically. And it was great. I mean, it gave me a lot of time to just kind of focus on making things, being a lot more creative and artistic during that period of time. Like taking an object, instead of just selling that little object, I would, personalize it by making a little stand, doing something to it so that you were able to buy something cool, but it was like ready to just be added to your collection. And it kind of took me back into my more artistic phases in my career, where I was like, taking a skull or something and cutting it up and creating a preparation or something unique. So that was actually, it was a troublesome time because you never knew what was going to happen in the world, but it was also a good time for creativity and to just sort of rework our business and figure out what to do with ourselves,
Yeah, it's funny how those pivotal moments always are an opportunity to sort of like reinvent what you're doing and reprioritize everything. But it sort of gives you a lot of time to really reprioritize what's truly important about what you do, whether it be from a business perspective or from a personal perspective, what you truly valued from a creative perspective in your case.
Sure.
It is interesting because it's funny how it is at the same time an extremely stressful sort of period, but at the same time it can be a very liberating period as well.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a lot of businesses fail. I saw a lot of businesses that couldn't figure it out, and I saw a lot of businesses skyrocket and do incredibly well during a time where they should have probably failed. You just had to be, once again, you had to be quick-witted. You had to know, you have to be able to deal with change quickly.
Yeah, just problem solving skills in general.
Yeah, but it was like pivoting. It was like taking your business and just throwing a new spin on it and being able to do that with ease.
And when you say ease, were you most, and if you could thank something for that successful pivot, would you say it was more your team?
My community.
Your community, your customer base.
Our community of people. Yeah. Everybody stuck with us. Even, we had to tell 4,000 people, guess what? We're not throwing these shows. So, we'll let you know when we can, but our vendors sticking with us that we're doing the shows, not pulling out and basically saying like, yeah, when you throw it again, we're in. And then, our clientele and like the people that follow us and kind of keep us going as a community, they all stuck with us too. And I think doing the auctions was an even better time because it gave them an intimate opportunity to hang out with me, to hang out with like my friends. And, it was just like 3 of us, my wife, me, and like 2 other people. And we were doing these like fun spirited auctions every Saturday that weren't stuffy because auctions can be very stuffy.
Of course.
Once, twice sold. This was like, hey, this is what this thing is. And we were like kind of just hanging out with our people. So anyone that wanted to come in and be part of it, whether they were buying something or just hanging out or asking a question, it created this new sense of community. And I think that was probably one of the most successful things that we've ever done as a business.
Yeah, it was sort of going through adversity with your community cemented the relationship even further.
Yeah, and everybody was kind of going through the same thing. So we all were relating to each other. Everyone was scared, so we could all be scared with one another. So yeah, I think if anything kept us going, it's our community. It's been the thing we're most lucky for.
Okay. And when you sit down with the average community member, have you found them to be followers of your work for decades, recent, most, and generalizing?
It's all, there's some people that I think are probably interested in like my interior design now, which I've been really focusing on. And then there's other people that like what I do for my TV show. And then there's other people that like followed me since the internet was, around on like MySpace and Facebook. And then obviously on Instagram, because I get that a lot, people that come to my shows now are like, hey, I've been following you since the very beginning. And it means a lot to me.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
That must feel incredible. Yeah.
Well, social media really changed the whole game.
Of course. And that's why I'm asking that question, because it is extremely difficult to build a community now, extremely difficult. And that's why I wanted to sort of understand it, because if it's people that come from, mostly from back in the day, well, you can understand it, right? It's been decades. They've been following your work. They understand, they pretty much know you almost as a person, not only your work. But for people that are more recently discovering your work, what's the factor or the variable that has helped them build that connection with what you do so quickly, especially now that it's so difficult because of the amount of the noise, the amount of people trying to get their attention? What do you think has made that with you?
I think that it's important to stay current. And that's always the biggest challenge. You can't just keep doing the same thing. You have to evolve. I'm not just saying me as an artist, but you as a business. So I think keeping people engaged and keeping people like excited about what you do is the most important thing. You just can't keep being the same person. You have to grow.
Yeah. And when you say you have to evolve, do you have to change the products that you have? You have to change what you value? Do you have to change how the business operates, like the model in and of itself? Like, which variable is the one that connects with the consumer or with the community? Sorry, the most.
Well, I think it's all those things. I can't have an Oddities flea market and just, it's like the same exact thing every single time. You have to always be looking for new talent. Have to have new things. You have to do things that excite people, or they might just be like, unfollow. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah. So it's
which does happen.
Of course.
It does happen.
Of course. Yeah. So it's like a natural reflection of your development, both personal, creatively, professional, business. Okay. Interesting.
All those things kind of go hand in hand though.
Yeah. No, but you always hear that, right? Like never stop learning, which sounds super superficial and whatever, right?
Well, don't put yourself in a rut to where you're doing something that you're just doing because you have to,
right?
And don't do something that you hate. I mean, that's where I'm the most lucky human being, because I absolutely love what I do, and I love my people, and I love to constantly, evolve and learn about new things and try to present the things that I'm learning to the general public, which is very important. And I think that's the only reason why I probably stayed current.
Yeah.
If I have. I mean, maybe I'm not current.
Of course. Yeah. Because education, development is very, very challenging. And if you don't have the passion for the process that you've had, then eventually you're going to lose that battle, because it's
going to show.
Yeah. It's going to show either in your ability to adapt from a business model perspective. It's going to show in your creative direction, or in the products that you're showing, or in the relationship with your community. Yeah. That's very, very interesting.
Yeah. You have to have confidence, dude. I remember when I got these, I have tattoos on my hands. They're not very unique today. Most people have tattoos on their face or their tongues or whatever.
Yeah.
I got these when I think right around 18 years old, and like like some people did, but very few people had tattoos on their hands. But I got these sort of as like an ode to, guess what? You're never going to be a totally normal human being. Just follow your path, man. And it seems to have worked out, I guess.
Wow. That's that, man.
But I look down at my hands all the time and I'm like,
yeah,
okay, I think you made the right choice. I've had a few like older people. I remember I went to an antique show in Manhattan at the Armory. It's a very prestigious antique show with, $3 million paintings. Like it's like the cream of the crop. And there's this one old couple, and they were really fantastic. And I was having a great conversation with them. And they're like, wow, you're so intelligent. We thought you were a doctor until we looked at your hand.
What'd
Which
you
was
say?
like
No,
kind of
I'm a
insulting,
pirate.
but at the same time,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
understood what they were saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think now you'd probably appreciate a comment like that a lot more now. It's kind
Go
of
with the
the,
flow.
yeah. What about, other than COVID, did you ever have to go through other big, major pivotal moments in your career?
Yeah, I moved from Brooklyn. I was essentially there most of my life, at least my formative years and my professional ones. So moving out of New York was a huge thing for me and my wife. We had spent a long time there. Our careers were really based there, and it was a scary move, which we did right, kind of like on the cusp of COVID. And also it was daunting because I had an enormous collection there. It's grown even further here. But just going through that, I think that was probably one of the biggest moves we ever made, literally and figuratively.
And why was it so pivotal for your career? Because of, well, what was the
Well, not
risk? What
necessarily
was
to
the
my
challenge?
career.
Yeah.
I think it was tough, like relocating.
Uh-huh.
I think it's great for a career. Like we ended up buying a house from 1874. And what's cool about the house is that, it wasn't just like, hey, you move in. We got to put our own personal stamp on it.
Yeah,
But
you have
it
some
really like,
photos online, right?
I have a lot. Like you just go
Yeah.
to my Instagram, Ryan Matthew Cohen. I've put quite a bit of picture. Like usually what I'm showing is either stuff from my collection or, how our house is evolving.
Okay, interesting. And now getting into sort of more of the creative development and creative process. Uh, I'm guessing you've always had a very strong sense of creative identity or DNA, right? Like you've never deviated a lot or traveled a lot of tested a lot of different things, right? You've tested, you've learned, you've grown, but your DNA is always there and has always been there, right?
I can't be anything else but an artist.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's funny when you asked me at the very beginning, you're like, what is it that you do? And I feel like I used to say artist. That was like the first thing that would come out of my mouth. And I still very much feel that way. I feel like I am an artist and I've just always been a creative person. A funny story, not to go too far back, but I think when I was like 10, 8, I forget. In elementary school, they thought I was going to be like some kind of artistic genius. So instead of just like sitting in the classroom and learning, they stuck me in this like cubicle and they made me just work on drawings and art. But like everyone else was in the class. So it was kind of a strange thing. I don't know. Maybe it had like something to do with how I am today. Who knows?
Interesting. Have you ever tried to find the teacher that did that?
No.
She might have very, very unique and interesting insights.
But my art teacher was like obsessed with what I was doing. And I think she saw this early talent and she was always trying to push me to do more. And she's someone that I should probably get in touch with because she did a lot for me. And this is like in my early years, elementary school, middle school, they pushed me to like really take my talents and do something with it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I'm going to be honest. I find you really, really interesting, Ryan. I mean,
Thanks,
I don't think you understand how rare it is to be not only talented creatively from a very, really early age, but you also had the business and entrepreneurial side, which is even more rare.
That is rare. That is very rare to be like,
yeah,
to be a creative person and be able to like run the business. I thank my wife for it a lot. She came from a business background, so it's definitely helped. But yeah, since I was young, like I always just figured out how to make things work.
Yeah, because it's a very weird, and this is part of why I have this podcast, because I'm also that way. I was born in an environment where a lot of people are sort of like the in-betweeners between, highly creative industries or, business or highly rational industries.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because I did see that. I found that they're almost completely opposites, right? From everything. The way that you have to look and think about creativity is completely different to how you need to think about business. Or if it isn't, you need to understand both relationships and how they interconnect with each other, right?
And balance them.
Yeah, and exactly. And understand that balance, that dance really, really well. But it is very difficult because again, and I can see it when I'm speaking with you, you can look at things like from an artistic perspective, understand it, whether it be intuitive processes, whether it be, I don't know, something abstract or subjective, but then you can also take something that requires complete rational and logical thought and not get lost between all of that process, which is very, very difficult.
Yeah, and I struggle with it sometimes. I mean, there's certain days where, I have to work on something, and I'm supposed to be doing something else with the business. And, as I was saying before, like something happens to me when I'm not creative. So oftentimes I have to just like take a day and just work down in my studio and get it out. Whatever that might be. It might just be working on a new piece or restoring something, but it's this creativity that when it's there and readily available, you have to get it out.
Yeah. No, I get it. And I truly can respect that. And obviously not to be like, oh, like to get too much, to feel you uncomfortable with the praise or anything. But again, I think that it's so important it's very educational for people that have no idea about this world. And I think so many people get lost in either one or the other direction. They pursue something because they require their money. They lose track of what they were born to do, or, they're artists that never really have a fulfilling career because they haven't been able to get both parts right, or either of them, So I definitely think there's a lot that you can learn from all of that. But, and I completely understand what you're saying in terms of that, like that intuitive need to sort of, because it is some almost like you have this awareness, right? And it's both logical but emotional of when it's time to either disconnect and go out there and look at the sky and just take photos, or focus on looking at this piece that you just bought and think about nothing else. And then there's others time where you understand when it's about, okay, I have to approach this rationally. I have to sort of like, either it's time to connect myself into the matrix or disconnect myself from the matrix almost.
For sure.
Yeah. Wow. Very, very interesting. And when it comes to your creative process, what would you say, and this is also a question you're probably going to hate, but I do try to ask this. It's a question that artists always hate, but I think it's an interesting question. How would you describe the DNA of who you are creatively?
I don't know.
It's always the same thing. I really don't know. Yeah. Like if you could say, like, I don't know, for example, consistently, I've always been more attracted to specific emotions, political things that express political or philosophical ideas, things that are completely abstract and subjective. And artists hate this question because of how relative and subjective everything is, right? But I think that it does help to sort of be able to pinpoint what are the variables that have always been through a creative person's identity, not only for themselves, but for other people to truly understand and value who they are creatively in a lot of ways, especially people that don't understand art a lot,
Yeah. That's a tough question. I don't know.
Let's think about it in a different way. What about favorite music? You said metal. What about your favorite artists?
I don't really have one.
Specific painters,
I mean, I like Renaissance paintings. I like a lot of the early paintings of that time period. There's, some modern artists that I like.
Okay. So
I mean, there's things that I'm influenced by as an artist, if that's maybe what you're asking.
Yeah, sort of. Because I do want to get to understand who you are, like the heritage behind who you are creatively. I understand that what you're doing is a balance between something that's been you for a very long time and that always will be, and something that is new that sort of helps reinvent or reinforce that, give it innovation, give it freshness, give it relevance. But I do want to grasp what that is before I can get into sort of more how you've adapted that through time, if that makes any sense. And I don't want to get very complicated or abstract here, but I don't know.
It's a little complicated. Yeah. I don't know where my stuff comes from. I think that I definitely pull a lot from years ago. I'm not doing anything new either. I think I'm taking processes that once existed and I'm putting my own take on them. How they came to be, I really don't know. How they became of interest, I'm not quite certain.
Yeah. Sorry. And I know it's very technical, but I find myself asking that question a lot. It's almost a question for people that don't have a lot of things to think about and think about pointless, complicated topics. But awesome. No, I love that nonetheless. Now, when
Yeah,
it comes,
sorry, I felt like a little bit out of left field there.
no, not at all.
I
Not at all.
probably
I
need
mean,
to see a therapist. You know what I mean? I probably need to figure out why I am the way that I am.
No, I love it. And in and of itself, it answered the question anyways. So, now when it comes to, again, also your creative process, would you say it's more focused on the people that are going to appreciate it? So the viewer, or almost always on yourself?
Both.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of things that when I really take the time, when I'm making a one of a kind piece, something that I'm really pouring my heart and my soul into, those pieces they could take a month to create, or longer, or sometimes shorter. And then there's the pieces that are a little bit more simplistic that I'm releasing to the general public. And there's a big difference between the two things. And it's more, usually it comes down to like time, what I'm willing to do, or if I'm willing to, go out on a limb and do something totally new and crazy.
So how would you say you're risk averse when it comes to your business, and risky, or a risk taker when it comes to your creative development?
Oh yeah, I think I'm a risk taker when it comes to my art. It's really tough. I haven't really had a huge amount of time to work on my art for like the past year.
Right.
I haven't made any my masterpieces, like my big pieces that, I used to put stuff in museums every so often, or make something for a really huge, private client. I think the moving and all that stuff kind of took me out of it, but I definitely getting to the point where I need to focus and do one of those pieces.
Okay. Interesting. And has there ever been either something that you created or something that you found that you feel particularly proud of?
Yeah, listen, there's pieces that I made for something and I ended up not wanting to sell them because I wanted to live with it for a period of time. The pieces that I tend to make are very decorative. So I might make a piece that I always wanted, but I made it. So that was really the process that naturally occurred when I started making the exploded skulls. I had seen them at museums, and, as a collector at the time, I just couldn't afford to ever purchase a real one. So I was like, all right, why don't I look at the process and study it and see if I can, breathe new life into that process. And a lot of the things that I was doing, there was no information about them. So it really took a ton of research and, going to museums and taking a lot of pictures and doing things like that.
Awesome. And okay. And when it comes to big part of your creative process, both when you're identifying pieces and when you're creating your own history, science, what part does it play on your creative process? Like how does history influence your creativity?
Tremendously. I mean, for instance, if I go to Europe or something and I go to one of these museums, I suddenly get incredibly inspired to not necessarily make something in my collection, but seek things or, change the look of my home. And that's one of the things that's been the worst part of this whole pandemic, is not being able to travel, because that was such an essential aspect to our lives. Because that's where I took a lot of my creativity and inspiration from. Was just going out and seeing what else exists out there, or going to a new city and going to the museums there and just getting some level of inspiration from that, and then applying it to my own life.
Awesome. And when it comes to that specific inspiration, and I'm guessing it varies, you can get inspiration from probably a lot of different things, but have you found it that you've mostly been attracted to the cultural differences, like being around different cultures, different philosophical points of view? Has it been like just aesthetical differences? Has it been looking back at history and how people thought back in the day, or views on specific social problems, or what's the
I don't think I go back that far necessarily. I think it's more of an aesthetic one for me typically.
Right. Yeah.
So, for instance, when I used to go to Paris all the time, just looking at the architecture or the interiors of some of these places gave me the influence to start moving in a different direction. In what I was doing in my own apartments in Brooklyn. And you're taking a very small space. You're looking at a castle or something, and then trying to adapt a piece of that into your 1,000 square foot apartment in Brooklyn. But I've always been able to kind of do that to a certain degree.
Yeah. Wow. Damn. No, I get it. I get it. And have you ever been to Mexico City specifically?
Yeah. Hmm.
How's the antique game in Mexico City? Because I'm from Mexico City originally.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah,
I don't recall shopping a lot in Mexico City.
really. It's interesting because there's this thing, and obviously if you're ever inspired, because you're right now, where are you at right now? You said Connecticut.
I'm in Connecticut. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's that, like a 4 hour flight, 5 hour flight max? I don't know.
Yeah.
But in Mexico City is obviously a very, very old city. And
Mhm.
to this day, it's very common to find, not on the street, like on the center of the city, but to find antiques from, thousands of years ago, from the Aztecs. I mean, pieces that are, I have a couple right here. I'm going to show you.
Yeah, please. Maybe I can help authenticate them.
It's also an incentive so that people look at the video format of the episode. But look,
You're going to cut up the video part, right? A little bit?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
This thing is, I don't know. I'm not a collector. I don't know how old it is, but you get these,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those look like Aztec designs.
Yeah. And they're old. I mean, this one you touch and it feels like sand. Like it feels like it's just going to, so I don't know, for somebody, it's definitely something that I think, based on what you collect, something that you'd be interested in, just as a quick note, for entertainment value. But
and maybe I need to go to Mexico City. It hasn't been on my list of places.
You should. And it's interesting because these I got, and I guess I shouldn't say, because technically it's illegal. Technically it's illegal to own them in Mexico, but I got this from a guy that goes, there's a volcano here. And he literally walks around the volcano and looks for things, and he finds things that are hundreds, thousands of years old just on the floor.
Yeah. I have friends that were in Peru recently, and they went out into the desert and they were finding ancient pots from like 3,000 years ago, and, skulls that had not washed up, but they were just out.
Yeah.
There was these mass graves, and you admire it and you take the thoughts with you, or you take a picture.
Awesome, Ryan. Well, just before we wrap up this episode, which I think has been highly, highly educational, I do want to ask you a couple of questions. Difficult. One is a question that I always enjoy asking. It's a very cheesy question, but a question that you might need to take the time to think about. And that's if you could ever go back to a specific moment in your life where you needed the most advice, and this could be, let's actually divide it. Let's think business first, or let's think creative first. What would be the best piece of creative advice that you'd give yourself if you were like in that moment where you needed it the most?
Creative advice. Yeah. See, I think business advice, I probably needed the most help when I was younger, because, when I moved out at 18, I was trying to just figure it out.
Right.
I just moved to New York City from upstate New York. I was like, all right, I'm just going to figure out how to live here. No real money, no prospects. Basically just like a place to live. And that was it. I didn't have a job or anything. And I slowly figured it out. So, I think that I took certain chances. I think just moving in general was a big chance. And I made it work. But I'm trying to think what the advice I would have given to a young creative guy.
Think about it. I guess
do what you want.
We're not no hurry to think about it.
Yeah, like just do things that are for yourself, which I've always kind of done that, but do things that are for yourself and not for what you think someone else might like.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I think also a lot of people struggle with that, because, and that's why I think there's so many things to learn from you, because you were always assertive in your personal identity from a very, very young age. You didn't let opinions and feedback of others really shake that at all. From a business perspective, you also had the same sort of disciplines and character traits, and people can be, I think and based on the conversations that I have, because I do have a lot of conversations with a lot of people from, multiple creative disciplines, and there's always two types, generalizing, of course. There's the guys that were similar to you that were in school, they had pink hair, they had eyeball tattoos, never really cared what other people said or thought, both from a creative and business that reflected itself in all areas of their life. And then you have the others that were extremely vulnerable to external feedback.
Yep.
And they eventually got at the very beginning, it was detrimental to them because
Sure.
you don't know how to handle that. But over time, that vulnerability and openness to other people was the foundation for their development. But that usually takes people a longer period of time. You know, you're talking about people that find that they want to be creatives when they're 30 or 35 or 40 or 25, you know, not 10.
And they should be. I've always appreciated feedback. You know, maybe even if someone was like maybe even criticizing something in a negative way, I've always appreciated it. And I've always thought about it. There's things that people said about my earlier works that I think about today. And I always make sure not to do those things. So I think it's really important. You can't always have people just saying, oh, that's beautiful, that's amazing. Like you need to see what other people's point of view are. I can't ever grow otherwise.
I completely agree. The fact is that a lot of artists don't have the emotional development required for that process. A lot because of our nature, right? We're very open to emotions, to things, to curiosities, to opinions. And it's very easy when you're very young and you're pursuing something like this that tends to attract a lot of positive feedback, but also a lot of negative feedback, and focus on the negative feedback. Maybe a parent that didn't support it, you know, or
especially with social media now.
Especially, exactly.
Anybody can have an opinion on anything that you do or say. And they're allowed to a certain degree.
Exactly. And that's why I think that's such an important topic nowadays, because when 20 years ago, well, yeah, maybe your friend thought your work was shit, or maybe your uncle thought you were weird, but whatever. But now, you know, you go on social media, you get feedback from 1,000 different people. You're 15 years old, you know, or you're 14 years old, and they're like, wow, your work is trash. And that can really affect yourself emotionally, which will therefore affect everything else. It will affect your ability to have confidence creatively as an artist and who you are. It can affect the confidence that you want when it comes to pursuing a career from a business perspective, because again, you do need to be solid to pursue this eventually.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, you're developing your confidence at that age. So I would imagine that's very troublesome. And it's something that I didn't have to go through. Mm-hmm. So I feel for the young people of today that are kind of going through that.
Well, it probably also has a lot of pros that we are yet to see, you know? Receptiveness and openness is always a good quirk for creativity. So, awesome, Ryan. Other than that, wow, what a great conversation. And again, truly appreciate you being on the episode. I think a lot of people are going to value the unique insight that you gave on, I guess, not only an oddity when it comes to your like literal oddities that you collect, but an oddity when it comes to, you know, your career. Because I don't think a lot of people are familiar with careers like yours in this way.
Well, hopefully I've given people a little bit more insight on what it is that I do. And thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
If you enjoyed this episode and you want to directly support our podcast, make sure you check out the links in the description.